Hi, my name is Zach Byer, and today I will be presenting my results for the capital budgeting simulation that we did in HRA 310. Um, in this simulation, we took over the New Heritage Doll Company and were making investments, evaluating their finances, cash flows, overall just trying to improve their company APV, or actual present value, and trying to improve that as time moves forward by making investments and limiting expenditures, overall improving their bottom line. Now, if you look here, I ended with an APV of 601.56, which is roughly a 300 unit increase from the start of the simulation in 2009. If you also look over here, you can see the revenue, operating income, and net income all increased from 2009 pretty significantly. And you can see that the actual revenue, operating income, and net income were above the forecasted. So all of my investments and other financial decisions throughout the company ended up succeeding more than projected. First, I'm going to discuss how I evaluated all the different investments that were presented in this simulation. If you go here to analyze and project updates, you can see all of the updates that I made throughout the simulation. And you can see the notes here. So these simulations, the campaign was very successful, generated more revenue than expected, performed in line with expectations, and all these other investments. Now there are some negative ones also, but overall did a pretty good job. Now all these different investments are actually in different aspects of the company. So some of these investments could be like through operational replacements, expansion throughout the company to different regions, investments in mutually exclusive projects, interdependent projects, and projects with more growth. So what I did is I wanted to diversify all of my investments into different aspects of the company. That way I could develop a well-rounded company, making sure that if one investment failed, I would still have others to generate income for the company. Also, my decisions reflected on I wanted to lay a good foundation in the beginning for this doll company so I could follow up and make other financial decisions that would in turn build off of the first ones that I had made. Now, making these investment decisions, I did this in a couple of ways. First, I examined the expenditures of each of these investments. So if you go to project details here, you can see all of my projects that I had invested in. You can just click on all these here, and they list the cost here, right, this number here, and that is in millions. But first, the expenditure of each project is what I wanted to focus on first, as well as these three metrics: NPV, which is net present value. That's the difference between cash in and cash out of the investment. IRR, which is the rate of return for the investment, basically the profitability of the potential investment, and payback period, which is how long it would take for the investment to become profitable. Now, we will look at individual investments later, but overall I wanted to kind of balance on the line between high and low risk investments. Just making sure that I wouldn't be losing a lot of money going all out and investing in all high risk investments. But the high risk investments do also generate a lot of profit for the company. Now, as far as resources go, we did have a pretty high budget, but those resources were put to limiting the cost of operation for the company. Go back to the dashboard here. You can see the distinguishing of revenue, operational profit, and total assets. Now you can see here that the sales and licensing are kind of split by production, but that's obvious because the production of all these dolls will probably exceed the licensing and retail, or the sales. But using these resources, I wanted to ensure that my company was well-rounded, while also limiting the expenditures for the operations and the production of the dolls to make sure that my bottom line increased. Now next we're going to talk about capital rationing, which is the constraint on spending due to limited funds. Now for me, I had a pretty high annual budget, and since I was pretty conservative in choosing the project updates and the investments that I was making, I didn't run into too much of a problem in losing some of my budget or running out of money for new projects. What I mainly did was looked at just the NPV, so the value of the investments I would be making and the rate of return when I did make those investments, to make sure that overall I would end up making money. Now we can also look at the cash flows here. Now looking forward, you can see here that my cash flows are increasing as time goes on, projected, and you want to make sure that your cash balances are increasing due to inflation, because if your cash flows are staying the same, then that means you're actually losing money due to inflation. So you want to make sure that your cash balance is increasing as time goes on. Now I will go back to project details again. Alright, going back to project details, I had to minimize the screen a little bit so we could see everything, but I'm going to go through each one of my decisions kind of quickly and just spell out all these decisions and how they are looking moving forward and how they did in the present. First, I'm going to start with the toddler doll accessory line. It was a low-risk investment, but it had a high rate of return and NPV, with a pretty high payback period. But if we look down here to net income, you can see that it's projected to exceed $1 million of gross income over the next 5 years. So that is a promising investment. Next, we're going to go to the Match My Doll clothing line. Now, this is also a pretty high payback period. It is high risk, so it could have gone either way. Luckily, looking down here, it is projected to turn a pretty high profit. Now, going through all of these, some high risks, the Dolls of the World, also another project expansion, the doll line, Grow With Me doll line, all have pretty high payback periods, but also pretty high rates of return and net present values. Go and try and find another one here. This is my expansion of the Match My Doll line, which ended up doing pretty well also. Design Your Own Doll project, high payback period. Children's accessory line, that is not having to do with dolls. That is actually more clothing. So that is a different investment that I made, but it ended up doing pretty well also. Another high risk investment, high payback period, roughly the same rate of return. Now this is a facility expansion, also high risk, not too bad of a payback period. I just wanted to expand the company and see how well the company was actually doing and see if we could generate revenue from other sources other than just the one plant. Now looking at the net income, it looks like it is on a steady increase, steady and slow increase, but looking at the update, it did pretty well, and it didn't cost too much. It only cost 1.29 million to do this. Now, facility consolidation, that actually cost a decent amount of money, but that is just making sure that the facilities are up to date and we're not losing money in expenditures from production. So a low rate of return, but it ended up increasing our bottom line slightly. Now, a medium risk expansion to England, also a decent rate of return, not a very high present value, but it still ended up making money. Now the virtual doll community, this is one that I was kind of excited about because it wouldn't cost any money. So if we lost money, it wouldn't end up being too much. But the income actually exploded, or it looks like it's going to explode from the projections. The Riders Club, a medium, low project cost, low payback period, so I decided to do that. I really wanted to expand on the company's media aspect through DVDs, music, video games, magazines, stuff like that, CDs, books, but all of my investments turned out well. So if we go to the income statement, you can see here my net income is growing at a pretty high amount. By 2024, it's supposed to be $59 million in income, that after taxes, and cash flows, they are increasing as well. So overall, I think I did a pretty good job with this simulation. Explained in capital budgeting terms, these rules give you a basis on smart investments and making those investments and making sure that you're facilitating each part of the company. Also making sure that you're expanding when you need to, making sure your money's going in the right place and you're not losing money on expenditures, and also gives you a way to plan for the future in this simulation. So I really enjoyed the simulation. It was kind of interesting to see. I did another simulation in 410 which was about pricing and marketing in that way, but I enjoyed this one as well, and I am done.